Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this quick lunchtime webinar. Metrics in Action, Optimizing Reviewer Management with Relativity Integration and Unlocking Data-Driven Efficiency in Review Operations. I'm Rocky Messing with Alterni, and together with me today is Heidi. Heidi, please say hi and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Heidi. I'm the Director of Managed Review at J&D eDiscovery. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
Great. Well, today we are going to be walking through a number of the different features and metrics that every review team needs to know about and to understand, and more importantly, is how to use them. Everyone talks about metrics, everyone talks about the different statistics that you can gather throughout a review. But we want to dig in a little bit to just what some of them mean, how you actually can understand them, and what are some of the scenarios where you want to use them or where you want to potentially even ignore them. So with that, let's get going. Um, so Heidi, uh, in general terms, what do metrics mean to you? What's important about metrics?
I utilize metrics to determine efficiency for review mainly, right? Which ultimately translates to cost savings for our clients. And that's the main thing for me. It also offers insights into reviewer productivity, reviewer accuracy, all of these types of things, which are absolutely paramount to every document review.
Yeah. And I assume you use metrics on every review that you are managing. Yeah.
Every single one, yes.
Every single one. And since the majority of your reviews are in relativity, that's going to be a lot of the focus for today is how we actually can pull different metrics and see different metrics from relativity and understand exactly what they mean. And so let's go through just some of the key metrics that are available and that you want to track and that you want to try to understand. Let's go through each one of these and talk a little bit about, what they mean and kind of how you use them. So the first one is looking at reviewer productivity. What does that mean? What does that mean to you, first of all, and how do you use it?
Yes, so reviewer productivity. What I look for is how fast are reviewers reviewing documents, right? So are they reviewing at 20 docs per hour, 50 docs per hour, 100 documents per hour? And in addition to finding out how fast are they reviewing so that you can monitor to both your timeline and budget, it's also helpful to understand the outliers, right? And I think understanding and seeing the outliers is also going to be key in kind of the other topics that we talk about, because if you have reviewers moving very fast, that's fantastic as long as they're being accurate, right?
Yep.
Also, if you have reviewers being too slow, perhaps, it's a good time to have conversations on both ends of those spectrums. And then also, if they are moving very slow, is there something that can be done to speed them up? Let's have a conversation to figure out, are you hitting particular sets of documents that are more troublesome, or are you just generally a slower reviewer? And so maybe it might be a time to consider maybe replacing certain reviewers with faster reviewers, those kinds of things.
Got it. And when do you start looking at productivity? Is it day one? Is it only a week into the review? Kind of when do some of these, specifically around doc review rates and how fast you're going, when does that actually come into play?
I would say within the first couple of hours, I'm already looking just to see, um, only because that's also an idea to indicate who's in the database, who's not in the database, how fast are they moving. Obviously, it's a good thing to understand that reviewers are going to move slowly the first day, the first couple of days. But I think also metrics will help you gauge, are they speeding up in review? Because that's also an expectation, right? They should be moving faster and faster as the days progress until the point where I like to call it a cruising altitude, right? At that point, you kind of know, okay, this project is moving at 50 docs an hour. They're getting through the content versus, oh, I was anticipating they would get through it at 50 docs an hour, but our 20 issue tags are making them go 20 docs per hour, right? So all these things come into play with reviewer metrics.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It is gets to designing the actual review and the review protocol, and how that's going to impact the metrics, right? You have a review where the tagging panel has 20 issues and they're all required, and you have to go through each one of them. Obviously, it's going to slow you down. But on the other hand, you want to balance that with, what is needed for the case team to actually be able to make sense of the data as a review is going on. Let's go to the next one, quality control. So obviously, you want to have quality within your review, and you want your reviewers to be doing a good job. What are some of the things that you're looking at, and when, again, are you actually looking at them?
Great question. So the quality control, I think, is something absolutely that as soon as possible, within the first day at a minimum, better yet, within the first several hours of review, you want to kind of get your QC team, your second level team set up to be reviewing so that you can, catch those issues up front. Sometimes it's not necessarily that a reviewer is doing something wrong. It's, well, while they are, it's mainly a function of did they misunderstand the review protocol? Are they misunderstanding the topics? Um, Sometimes they might not have accurate technical aptitude. All of those things can be uncovered so long as you're checking the QC up front. Because worst case scenario is, right, we let the review go on for a week and you didn't know you had a reviewer problem until a week in, and now, you know, even worst case scenario that they've now skewed models that we've been using, right, for AI and trends like that. So um, that's where it absolutely upfront, I think QC is very helpful in seeing what things are being overturned and why, because sometimes it's even a function of, in general, the team maybe can guide what they're seeing based on turnovers right up front. So I think that
Mhm.
reviewer QC and feedback can get, back to the reviewers faster, better productivity.
Yep. And I think one thing that is overlaying all of this as we continue to talk, I've now heard you mention a couple of times about talking to the reviewers and speaking to them and giving them guidance. While metrics are obviously important, and the numbers don't lie, what they say is what's actually happening, but it doesn't override no matter what our technology is doing, it doesn't override that human interaction, the coaching, the ability to actually work with those reviewers. So it's a great to hear you as you're explaining these, put them in reference to how you're actually interacting with the reviewers, which gets us to how well they're being utilized. A lot of times people will look at they're in meetings, they're having technical difficulties, they're having a lot of breaks, those types of things. So being able to track those types of metrics and seeing what's their build time versus their actual utilization time can be really important. But let's actually go to the last one here, engagement levels. What do you do in terms of actually helping and tracking your reviewers in terms of understanding, are they happy? Are they actually engaged on the review? Are they looking, are they maybe looking to jump somewhere else and go to another project? What are some of the things that you look for there in terms of understanding who your reviewers are and what their level of engagement is?
So I think reviewer feedback on the opposite way, so toward me, I think is something that, or toward the review manager, is something that's often underutilized. So sometimes we don't understand that reviewers have this key set of knowledge that they're working on multiple different matters across multiple different platforms, across multiple different teams, law firms. They have a wealth of knowledge of ways that they've seen things done that
Mhm.
we could ask them for their opinions and their input, right? So, almost on every project out of the gate, we do the reviewer training, the coding panels and everything is set up, the review is off to the races, and I say, if there are any efficiencies that we can gain, please let me know. Call me directly, email me directly, let me know. And I think it's offering them kind of that piece of that buy-in, right, of that project, just to ensure that they're engaged, to say, like, I do value your opinion. I would like to know what you're seeing, what you're thinking. And many times I've implemented things from reviewers that either I haven't done before because the project was new. Things like that, I think, are critical. I think it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, and being able to have that kind of feedback, obviously throughout the project, but also at the end of the project, getting ratings, getting feedback, all of those things, they go towards your overall metrics and understanding how well did either you perform for the reviewers or did the reviewers perform for you. Continuing on, let's talk a little bit, if my computer wants to. There we go. Some of the actual metrics that when you're doing a review in Relativity, what are some of the things that you're looking at? And here we have two examples from the Relativity Review Center, and these are actually taken from a actual review that you did in the recent past. Tell me what we're looking at here, the two images, and what do they mean to you?
Right. So, the top graph, it shows from left to right that initially we were seeing a high volume of responsive documents because we used prioritized review to actually feed more relevant documents to the reviewers. So, on the left side, on the top left graph, you can see that the responsive rates were higher. And then as time went on and the review moved further to the right, you can see kind of an overall trend of the team that responsiveness decreased. And that's what you would want to see. That's what you would expect. Now, it's interesting in the middle. I'm not going to talk about the top red line yet, but kind of in the middle, you'll see that there's a couple of spikes in responsiveness, right, from
Mhm.
particular reviewers. And that happens, and I monitor those because those don't throw red flags for me because I've assigned particular reviewers to review particular populations, right? So during QC, I might pop back in and say, okay, hey, we're noticing that, this is something that the team did not anticipate as being a responsive category of documents. However, they are, and therefore we didn't know that they were previously. So let's grab a save search, have somebody go in and review them. That's where I would expect to see one of those spikes of responsiveness. Now, the other thing that's helpful with this chart is on the top, you can see that magenta colored line. Now, what that shows to me is if you look at the trend just in general of all the other lines on the chart, that is a complete outlier. So what that shows me is that reviewer is actually number one, even though his line is the same shape as those in the rest, where it kind of responsiveness is higher and then it trails off toward the end, overall, that reviewer was above the mark in every way possible for review responsiveness. And so that is kind of something that you would want to train, check in with, right? And ultimately, if the reviewer is not able to correct to be in line with the team, to be in line with the responsive rates, then ultimately sometimes you might need to have a conversation or find them a new project that's better suited for them.
Yep. And the bottom chart?
Yeah, the bottom chart, right, shows where the responsiveness is yellow and then the not responsive is blue. And what you can see is, in general, the buckets are the same. However,
Right.
on the
Little
far
trend,
left, oh,
right?
sorry, I can't see. It's
Yeah.
very tiny here. Yeah, I misspoke. So the not responsive. So we're seeing a high volume of not responsive versus responsive documents. But on the far left, you can see, you know, how just basically looking at trends, I like to use this one to see kind of outliers, right? So, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So this one on the left obviously is a reviewer who it looks like their percentage of non-responsive data is higher, but they've also reviewed a lot more docs than
Exactly.
anyone else has. And again, it gets to the understanding, you can't just go by the pure metrics, right? You can't just look at the numbers as a standalone. You have to also understand what are these reviewers doing? Maybe, this reviewer has been on the review longer. Maybe this reviewer has more insights or is dealing with a different set of data, right? And it doesn't
Yep.
necessarily mean that there's something wrong if you see that, everyone else is right around that 80% mark. And then you've got this guy at 90% and this one who's at 67 or even lower. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's something bad, right?
Right. And it does go back to the conversation or the review manager being aware of who's working on what populations. So that person that's on the far left would not throw a flag for me if, for example, they were asked to go into a search and look at documents that are very quick to click through and mark not responsive, use copy from previous perhaps. But they're presumably not responsive because they don't contain content, but every once in a while there's one in there, right? So there's lots of different ways to slice the pie, but I think using all of these in conjunction with conversations and really understanding what's happening is where the sweet spot is.
Yep. Another great tool beyond Review Center is the Relativity Statistics Report. And here we have an example cleaned up with the reviewer names. Yeah, what are some of the things that you look at here and that stand out to you? And obviously this is in PowerPoint, so I can't do the fancy sorting that you normally would do. But just can you point out one or two things that when you're looking at this, and this is a script that is available within Relativity, what are some of the things that jump out at you right away?
Yep, and I'll say even for reviewer statistics, for those that are unaware, if you use the case metrics, you can actually set it up to have reviewer statistics automatically emailed to you at whatever interval you like. So I think that's kind of key. A few things that I would look at when I'm looking at reviewer statistics, and I use this tool in different ways at different times for different purposes. But number one, let's just say it's the first day of review. It's the end of the day. You're assuming everybody's put in 8 hours. Not necessarily to this picture, but let's just say by example, the first column tells me how long these reviewers have been in the database. If I was expecting everybody to be in the database approximately 8 hours and I saw somebody was in there for 4 minutes, let's have a conversation, right?
Mhm.
And maybe something happened, right? Maybe their mom fell down the stairs. Something happened, right? So let's have that conversation. It doesn't, anyway, I'll move on from that. Then another key one that I look at is distinct edits per hour, which is the second to last column, right? So this is going to show me how how many documents that are unique the reviewer reviewed in an hour. And depending on what time frame you select to run reviewer statistics on, maybe it's a day, and I would expect those rates to go up. But in general, they should not go down, or at least drastically, right? Because everybody should gain efficiency as they become more knowledgeable about the case, if they become more familiar with the people in the case. However, so the distinct edits per hour, I often will sort it from top to bottom, trying to look at the outliers, right? So if somebody is reviewing 120 documents per hour, that happens, and some people are extremely accurate with that, right? But you just want to be aware of those players and then maybe check some other areas in the review to see, well, how efficient are you? Do you have a lot of overturns or no? In which case, if you can find a reviewer that can fly through 100 docs per hour with little to no
Great.
changes, keep those,
Yeah,
right? And I
exactly.
do. On the flip
And
side, if you have somebody who's reviewing 2 documents per hour, that's not a good use of time or money for the client, right? And sometimes that happens if we looked at this table in detail. There's often a reason why some people have different metrics than others. But just off the bat, I like to use reviewer statistics. And then I also will cut out the outliers and then run an average so that I can see in general how fast are we moving, because I'm always tracking to a timeline, to a
Mhm.
budget, right? So I would also expect that over time, let's say day one, we're at approximately 20 docs per hour. Day two, we're at 30. Day three, we're at 40. Perfect. Then we're on that right trend to make progress.
Yep. The other piece that's always important to look at here is comparing the distinct edits per hour to the edits per hour,
Yeah.
because sometimes you'll see where they should generally be in line, but sometimes you'll see, for example, in this one, reviewer 32, where their edits per hour is 25 higher than their distinct edits per hour, which means that they're a lot of times going back to the same document over and over again. And it could be because the documents are hard and they realize something later, or it could be that there's something that they're not understanding and it's giving them trouble and they're kind of going back and forth and wavering, and maybe you need to give them a little more guidance to help them to understand how to properly review.
Absolutely.
Let's quickly, because we're somewhat running out of time here. Let's look at a couple of the metrics that within Alterny, when you're using Alterny to help manage your reviewers, some of the things that you look at here. And one of the first ones is this case metrics, which gives you a little bit of a guidance between what are as the speed. So we just talked about how many documents the reviewers are reviewing per hour. So what's their average docs per hour, but also given their score, which is their accuracy based off of the fields that you're tracking. And obviously, you want the majority of the reviewers to be as close to the top right as possible. When you see people who are down here in the bottom red, that's a problem, right? And we have some clients that will say as soon as the reviewers are dropping into that red consistently, then they're going to replace them. Others take a more human approach and will actually talk to them, help coach them. But obviously, you do need to do what's best for the client throughout. But like you said, looking at things over time, right? So you can dig into specific reviewers, try to see, okay, this reviewer, why are Amanda, is there something that changed that all of a sudden, she was really fast. She looked like, okay, beginning of the review, she picked up speed, but then dropped. One of the things that, has consistently been an issue throughout all the years with doc review is, reviewers who, as they see that an end of a project is coming, their rates sometimes tend to drop. And that's one of the things that you want to be on the lookout for and tracking through these types of graphs and seeing what the trends are and, like you said, what the outliers are there. But then being able to pull in all of their individual metrics to get at a glance who's doing what percentile they're in. And all of this information is really helpful in terms of because it gets aggregated and you're able, when you're bringing on new reviewers, you can see what their past history is. Even if they didn't do work with J&D before, you can see what they've done for other clients. So all of these things become really, really important throughout the life of a project. Anything to add in terms of the specific metrics with an attorney as opposed to the ones that you're getting out of relativity directly?
Not off the top of my head just now, but that's just because I just drew a blank because I'm thinking about what you're talking about.
Okay. One other piece is obviously, one of the important things is tracking the reviewer time to what they're billing to make sure that they're accurate and that from a client basis, you're able to make sure that the client's being charged correctly for what they're actually doing. And you can see here, one of the things that we're doing is we could see how much time the reviewers billed versus how long they were actually active, which is a little bit different than the time that's tracked in the reviewer statistics report because it's actually looking at not just when they're logged in and logged out, but actually when they're truly doing work within the database to be able to track and see what's the variance between what they build and what they are actually active and give you alerts and warnings and providing this information to the reviewers themselves when they're going to build their time so that way they know how long it was tracked, and there's no overbilling issues throughout the process. So again, we're running a little bit short on time due to the issues in the beginning. So let's jump through a couple things, and we want to answer at least one or two questions. But in terms of some of the benefits and some of the tools, we talked about some of the visualization tools, but the benefits of using the metrics, obviously improving, being able to help the team improve, being able to make sure that the team is happy, that that they're comfortable with the work and they're actually doing good work throughout, and making sure that you're putting the right people on the right cases. Just because someone's not doing a good job on this review doesn't mean that they're a bad reviewer. Understanding how they're doing based off of the content and based off of the subject matter is really important. So let's go to answer at least one or two questions here. I think we've got here. Here's one. Um, what has been the impact of using metrics since COVID? Has that changed? Heidi, you want to take that first? And
Well, I think one thing that has changed and been more helpful is depending on the systems, is reviewers, like in Alterny, reviewers are able to check their own rates. Number one. Number two, since COVID, I mean, our reviewers almost exclusively work remotely. So COVID has honestly not been a key differentiator for us.
so your
Um,
reviewers were already working remote mostly. Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. But I see that back in the day when I used to walk into the room where there were 80 reviewers sitting there, you had a very good sense of, okay, who's working, who's not, how fast are they doing, are they really struggling with documents, are they really looking to trying to figure out, and they're spending a lot of time just staring at the screen without clicking because they're trying to understand better. Or are they constantly pulling up their protocol to go back to it? And it gave you that human interaction to be able to actually understand what they're doing. What we've seen, at least what I've seen since COVID, with everyone going remote and staying remote on the most part, is that the metrics have become much more important in terms of understanding what the reviewers are doing. Without them, you don't get that same kind of insight, and it's not the same as having them sitting in front of you. There's just something different to it. But we are where we are, and I don't think we're going back anytime soon to that. One other question that came in, and I think you kind of addressed it slightly, is active learning. How do the metrics impact active learning when you're using active learning? Does your use of metrics change?
Ooh, active learning actually, you use different and additional metrics. So the charts that we looked at earlier with all of the lines moving across in relativity, that is an active learning project. So yes, I would say working with active learning, there's just even more insight available because you can also look easier at trends across teams to say, well, everybody else is reviewing and saying 75% is responsive. How come you're only saying 10% is responsive? So I think that's great. But there are so many different ways to slice the pie. But yes, active learning does make things a little bit different and faster.
Cool. Okay, so quickly, just to summarize, you know, you can utilize metrics to optimize your reviewer management, right? Understanding what the reviewers are truly doing. Having tools that either are natively built in or integrating natively with a tool like Relativity is really, really important. And it really comes down to how do you optimize your operations? How are you making sure that your team is doing the best that they can, making sure that they are really on point and that you're doing the best work that you possibly can for your client. Anything to add in terms of the overall summary?
No, I would just say, if you're not using metrics and or collaborate with others and find perhaps even mentors in the industry to help learn about these different tools because there is so many different ways to slice all of the metrics.
Yep. So find a mentor and stick with them and really educate yourself
Mhm.
is the key there. Great piece of advice. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate the time on the webinar, and please reach out to myself or Heidi on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to discuss all of the topics that we discussed here in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you.